The Mississippi River is drying up. Water levels in some areas near historic lows. It's already impacting supply chains and local tourism.
The Mississippi River has long been regarded as a backbone of the United States, a waterway that has shaped commerce, agriculture, and settlement for centuries. Its vast expanse and seemingly endless flow create the impression of constancy, a natural giant that moves at its own timeless rhythm. Yet recently, the river displayed an unusual and startling activity without warning, leaving observers unsettled. The event itself was brief, almost like a shift in mood from an ancient being, but the implications stirred deep unease. Something about the way the water moved, the sudden alteration in its patterns, hinted at hidden forces at work beneath the surface. For a river so essential, even the slightest anomaly draws attention, and this one felt unnervingly out of character. It was as though the Mississippi had signaled that its strength could not always be assumed, and that its mysteries remained far from fully understood. Before we start, hit the like and subscribe buttons for more exclusive news. The sight of a river behaving in ways that seem inconsistent with its usual flow has a profound psychological effect. To see water suddenly surge, sink, or swirl where it should not is to witness a disruption in one of nature's most reliable systems. The Mississippi is not a minor stream whose fluctuations might be overlooked. This is a river that cuts through the heartland, carrying billions of gallons of water, sediment, and nutrients daily. When such a force shows odd behavior, even momentarily, it shakes confidence in the stability of natural cycles. That moment of unpredictability ignites questions about whether the river might be under pressures far greater than what is visible. Whether environmental shifts, unseen seismic activity, or broader planetary changes are beginning to reveal themselves through the water's restless motion. Such sudden activity forces people to reconsider their assumptions about what the Mississippi represents. For generations, it has been thought of as a life-giving current, a channel for trade and a symbol of continuity. Yet a river is also a mirror of the environment around it. Every fluctuation in climate, every tremor in the earth, every shift in the balance between rainfall and drought eventually finds expression in the way water moves. If the Mississippi is showing unusual pulses or patterns, it could mean that the system feeding it and sustaining it is no longer in balance. When that balance falters, the river becomes a messenger, revealing truths that may otherwise go unnoticed until they grow into crises. The unease surrounding this event is tied not only to the surprise, but to the larger fears it awakens. People know that rivers are powerful and unforgiving when they exceed their bounds, and the Mississippi has a long history of catastrophic floods that altered entire regions. At the same time, the modern world has come to rely on rivers being controlled, measured, and predictable. Engineering projects have attempted to tame the Mississippi with levees, dams, and channels, but even so, the river maintains an independence that resists complete mastery. To see it shift suddenly without apparent cause reminds everyone that despite technological progress, humanity remains subject to forces that cannot be managed or entirely understood. The idea that this event could be a prelude to something larger, something beyond human preparation, lingers like a shadow. One of the most unsettling aspects of such river behavior is the sense that it could be linked to deep geologic or climatic changes. The Mississippi flows across a vast system of fault lines, aquifers, and floodplains. A sudden alteration in its activity may be a sign of shifting pressures underground, subtle tremors that ripple through the earth and express themselves in water long before humans can detect them with instruments. Alternatively, it could be the result of rapidly shifting rainfall patterns, storms feeding torrents into the system more quickly than expected, or drought leaving sections of the riverbed fragile and unstable. The river does not act in isolation. It reflects the sum of many forces, and to witness it behaving strangely is to see the interplay of those forces suddenly rise to the surface. Observers who saw the activity firsthand were struck by how abruptly it occurred, as though the river had a mind of its own. There was no gradual buildup, no weeks of warning. One moment the waters moved as expected, and the next they surged and twisted in ways that defied explanation. The abruptness is what left so many unsettled, because it suggested that whatever caused the event was not part of the familiar cycles of rain and snowmelt that typically influence the river. Instead, it hinted at something less predictable, a hidden hand stirring the waters. That is what draws the connection to deeper fears. The possibility that the systems humanity depends on are more fragile and volatile than once believed. When the Mississippi acts out of character, the entire region feels the tremor of unease. The river is a central artery for commerce, moving grain, coal, and countless goods across the country. Barges depend on its stability, farmers depend on its rhythm, and cities depend on its water supply. A disruption in the river is not just a curiosity of nature, it reverberates through the economy and society itself. The fear is not simply about water moving differently, but about what it means for the delicate interdependence between human systems and natural ones. A river that cannot be trusted to behave in predictable ways threatens not only livelihoods, but the very idea of security in a landscape that has always revolved around its flow. The event has sparked an urgent wave of speculation about what it might signal. Some point to climate change as the hidden driver, arguing that shifting weather patterns are making once reliable rivers behave erratically. Others wonder if tectonic movements beneath the continent are beginning to push upward, with the Mississippi acting as a sensitive indicator of pressure far below the surface. There are even those who frame it in more symbolic terms, seeing the river's sudden unrest as a warning that humanity's relationship with nature is reaching a breaking point. While no definitive explanation has emerged, the uncertainty itself is what fuels the fear. The human mind is quick to imagine the worst when faced with unexplained shifts in something as vast and consequential as the Mississippi. This unsettling occurrence highlights the fragile trust people place in natural systems. Rivers are often seen as eternal and unchanging in their existence, but history tells a different story. The Mississippi has altered its course in dramatic ways before, carving new channels and abandoning old ones, reshaping entire landscapes in the process. These transformations have occurred across centuries, but in the context of modern life, where stability is prized and disruption is feared, the idea of sudden change is deeply unsettling. The event serves as a reminder that the river is not bound by human timelines or expectations. It has its own rhythms, and those rhythms may be shifting in ways that no one can fully anticipate. Part of the dread stems from the recognition that water, more than almost any natural force, dictates human survival. Civilizations rise and fall with their rivers. The Mississippi, by showing unexpected activity, confronts people with the truth that the systems they depend upon are never truly under control. The fear that this behavior could escalate into something larger taps into a primal anxiety about water's dual role as giver and destroyer. Every strange ripple and sudden surge becomes a symbol of what might lie ahead, a potential unraveling of the stability that communities along its banks have worked so hard to establish. The implications extend far beyond the immediate spectacle of the river's motion. If this activity is a symptom of broader instability, then the Mississippi may be acting as a barometer of the planet's changing conditions. Just as scientists study ice sheets, coral reefs, and atmospheric temperatures for signs of stress, rivers, too, can provide early warnings. A sudden and unexplained surge in the Mississippi might be one of those warnings, a glimpse of changes that will become more pronounced in the years ahead. The challenge is whether humanity can interpret such signals in time to prepare, or whether the warnings will only be understood in hindsight when the consequences are already unfolding. The unusual behavior of the river also stirs questions about the limitations of human knowledge. Despite all advances in hydrology, geology, and climate science, there remains an element of mystery in how natural systems behave. The Mississippi's sudden activity revealed how much is still unknown, and that gap in understanding feeds unease. People are used to believing that science can explain and predict nearly everything, but when a river as vast as this one moves in ways that defy immediate explanation, it exposes the limits of certainty. Those limits create fertile ground for fear, because what cannot be explained cannot easily be controlled or prepared for. The Mississippi River has always carried with it a sense of majesty and weight, as though the waters themselves remember every storm, every flood, every drought, and every human endeavor along its vast banks. When it shows sudden changes without warning, there is an almost visceral awareness that something larger is stirring. What happened recently cannot be dismissed as a trivial ripple or a natural quirk. It was the kind of shift that left onlookers uneasy, because it was both subtle and dramatic, strange enough to feel out of character, but powerful enough to seem deliberate. To stand at its edge and watch the water behave differently from what generations of memory and expectation would suggest, is to confront the idea that the river has depths of mystery still untouched. The river's sudden activity pulls the mind into a state of heightened attention. At first, observers might attempt to rationalize what they see: an odd wave, a quick surge, a displacement of current. But when those explanations dissolve in the face of what feels undeniably unusual, unease spreads quickly. It is not only about what the water is doing in that moment, but about the awareness that the foundation of life along the river depends on the river not doing precisely that. Stability is the currency of rivers when they serve as highways of commerce and anchors of settlement. A sudden and unexplainable shift, however brief, cracks that confidence. It places everyone in a mental space where the reliability of nature seems less secure, where the possibility of deeper forces at play cannot be ignored. One of the most striking aspects of this kind of event is the speed with which human imagination responds. The Mississippi is not merely a waterway. It is a vast stage upon which the lives of millions are tied. When it acts unpredictably, minds race to fill the void of explanation. Some see in it the possibility of climate systems breaking down further than anticipated. Others view it as an omen of seismic instability beneath the continent, a trembling of the earth announced through restless water. Still others sense that it could be the beginning of a chain reaction, a change that does not remain isolated but spreads into patterns of weather, soil, and ecosystems all along the basin. The river is large enough and the event peculiar enough that speculation flourishes. The Mississippi has long been a river of paradox, both provider and destroyer, both stable and restless. Its banks have nourished agriculture for centuries, yet those same waters have periodically swept away entire towns. What makes sudden, unexplained activity so troubling is that it reminds everyone of this duality in a raw and immediate way. It strips away the illusion that human control through levees and engineering projects can fully harness a river of such scale. When the water moves strangely without warning, it is the river itself reminding its observers that it remains alive, dynamic, and ultimately independent. This realization creates a fear that is both practical and existential, rooted not just in logistics of commerce or farming, but in the deep recognition that humans are small beside forces like this. To watch a massive river stir unexpectedly is to feel a shift in the rhythm of the earth itself. The Mississippi drains 40% of the continental United States. Its movements reflect the heartbeat of a vast portion of the landmass, from rainfall in the north to tributaries in the west. When it behaves strangely, it is not just one river reacting, but an entire interconnected system expressing tension. Such tension could arise from alterations in snowmelt patterns, from groundwater surging up through hidden layers, or from unseen collapses of sediment beneath the surface. Each possibility carries implications that stretch beyond the riverbanks, hinting at hidden transformations underway across an entire continent. The sudden activity thus becomes a symbol, a signal that something within the broader system may be shifting toward instability. The cultural impact of this cannot be underestimated. The Mississippi is not only physical, it is deeply embedded in the mythology of America. It has been written into songs, stories, and national identity as a symbol of endurance. For it to show unpredictable behavior is to unsettle not just farmers and shippers, but the very imagination of the people who have long depended on it as a metaphor of permanence. When such a symbol falters, even briefly, it awakens a collective anxiety. If the river itself is restless, what else might be on the verge of shifting beneath the veneer of stability? This is why the event resonates so deeply, not merely as an observation of nature, but as a disturbance in the collective sense of security. The Mississippi's sudden unrest also provokes questions about thresholds. Natural systems can absorb stress for long periods, appearing stable, while pressures build invisibly beneath the surface. Then, with no warning, the threshold is crossed, and what looked calm becomes turbulent. The river's odd behavior might be seen as a signal that such thresholds are nearer than expected. Perhaps the buildup of sediment, the weight of shifting rainfall, or the influence of rising temperatures has reached a point where the river must adjust suddenly and violently. These thresholds are rarely predictable, and when they are crossed, the changes that follow can be irreversible. That is the kind of possibility that fuels the fear, not just a strange moment of activity, but the thought that the event marks the beginning of a new and uncertain chapter in the life of the river. In this light, the Mississippi becomes more than water flowing to the Gulf of Mexico. It becomes a messenger of planetary change, one that speaks through sudden surges and inexplicable movements. Unlike the slow reports of scientific studies or the gradual trends visible in data charts, this kind of activity is immediate and visceral. It does not wait for interpretation, it presents itself in real time, demanding acknowledgement. That immediacy is what gives it power to unsettle, because it cannot be ignored or explained away in the moment. It forces those who see it to confront the reality that something larger than human systems may be unfolding. The Mississippi's behavior also brings into focus the vulnerability of infrastructure. Bridges, ports, and levees have all been built with the expectation that the river will behave within certain parameters. Even slight deviations can create stress on those structures. A surge where one is not expected can erode foundations, compromise locks, or alter channels essential for navigation. The fear, then, is not abstract. If the river continues to behave in uncharacteristic ways, the entire network of human activity that depends on it could be put at risk. Such a prospect makes the unexplained activity more than a curiosity of nature. It becomes a warning shot across the bow of human reliance. For communities living along its edge, the Mississippi has always been both a blessing and a looming threat. Farmers rely on its nutrient-rich soil, industries rely on its steady flow, and cities draw their water from its depths. Yet those same communities have endured floods, levee breaches, and shifts in channels that have devastated lives. What makes the recent activity so unnerving is the sense that it does not fit within the familiar cycle of floods and droughts. It was not forecast, nor did it follow the usual signals. It was as though the river itself had moved outside of the patterns that people have come to expect. That unpredictability is what ignites deep fear, because it suggests that future disruptions may arrive not with gradual buildup, but with sudden, unexplained force. The Mississippi's strange movements remind us of the delicate balance between water and land. For all the engineering efforts to guide and contain the river, its natural tendency is to meander, to carve new paths, to alter its own geography. This restless nature has always been part of its character, but modern society has imposed constraints to preserve human needs. A sudden deviation, however brief, suggests that those constraints are tenuous. If the river chooses to resist its engineered path, the consequences could be dramatic. This possibility looms in the background of every unexplained surge or shift, adding weight to the fear that the event could be a prelude to something larger. On a deeper level, the event touches on the fragility of human perception of time. Rivers operate on scales far longer than human generations. What feels sudden to an observer may be part of a long cycle unfolding beyond comprehension. Yet for those who live along its banks, the immediate impact matters most. To them, the river's sudden activity is not part of a slow geological story, but a disruption of daily life. This tension between long natural cycles and human immediacy makes such events especially difficult to interpret, and that difficulty feeds anxiety. Without clear answers, the imagination fills in the gaps with possibilities that often lean toward the fearful. The event also underscores how closely tied humans are to water even in modern times. Cities may rise with skyscrapers and industries may hum with machines, but a shift in a river can still ripple through every level of society. Food supply chains, energy transport, and even drinking water depend on a stability that cannot be guaranteed. The Mississippi's sudden unrest is a reminder of that dependency. It is a signal that despite centuries of progress, humanity remains bound to the rhythm of natural systems. When those systems show signs of strain, the entire structure of modern life feels vulnerable. This vulnerability is magnified by the sheer scale of the Mississippi. Unlike a small creek or local waterway, its basin spans multiple states, influencing vast landscapes and millions of lives. When it shows signs of odd behavior, the potential consequences ripple outward like concentric circles. Each community along its banks feels the reverberation, and together those reverberations create a collective unease that spreads across the nation. The river's sudden activity thus becomes not just a local event, but a national moment of reckoning. A reminder that the forces holding everything together are not as unshakable as they might appear. The Mississippi's unexpected motion creates a space where people are forced to confront what they fear most: the collapse of predictability. Society is built on routines, patterns, and assumptions that tomorrow will resemble today. When the natural world disrupts those assumptions, the sense of security dissolves quickly. That dissolution opens the door to larger fears, whether of environmental collapse, economic instability, or even existential threat. The event is not frightening only because of what it was, but because of what it might mean. Because it represents the possibility that the ground beneath familiar life is shifting in ways that cannot be controlled. If you like this video, please give it a like and subscribe to our channel. Also, could you leave your comments below and tell us, what are your thoughts on the strange Mississippi River activity without warning? We want to hear from you. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.